I mean, it was basically a bloody red ocean, right? So it's a lot of what happened that I didn't want, or I don't consider the wins that have led me to be where I am now.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. Today, I've got an amazing guest, like I promised you every week. George Bandarian is joining me on the show. George, welcome to the How Did It Happen podcast.
Thanks, Mike. It's awesome to be here. So glad we made it happen.
Yeah, so it took a while, but let me tell you a little bit about George before we dig in. So George is the founding partner of Untapped Ventures, which is an early stage studio fund based in LA that builds and invests in startups, reimagining the new future of work and then some. We're going to talk about the then some because he's got some new stuff he wants to share. George and his team help early stage founders, particularly in the B2B and the SaaS space, with idea validation, rapid market traction to achieve product market fit, fundraising, as well as building a founding team, partnerships, culture, and any needed operational infrastructure. George is also a speaker and frequent guest on industry podcasts. He presents at tech and startup events, incubators, and accelerators. George has been featured in or on Business Insider, Entrepreneur on Fire, Inc. Magazine, EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, and multiple podcasts, including Built to Sell, which I've been on as well, George.
Awesome.
Business Owner Success Formula, Exit Coach Radio. That sounds like a cool one. Business Owners Freedom, and many, many more. He's personally worked with A-list entrepreneurs, including Peter Diamandis, Vern Harnish, Ash Moria. How do you say that?
Moria.
Moria. Yeah. Ash Moria. I apologize for that. And John Warlow. And finally, George's MTP, or his massively transformative purpose in life, is self-actualization, to help millions of people achieve breakthroughs and access their untapped potential. That's amazing, George. You can learn more about George at his websites, which are georgebandarian.com, untapped.ventures. And he's also George Bandarian on LinkedIn and Instagram. Yeah. Okay, so before we get started, just a quick disclosure. George and I met at Abundance 360. We got acquainted there. And as a result of that introduction and our subsequent conversations, I am an investor in Untapped Venture, his studio fund that we're going to be talking about. So I wanted to make sure I let everybody know that. And now, George, I start every show with the same question. How did it happen for you?
Yeah, great. Excited to dive into that. And thanks for that disclosure. And thanks for being a partner with us as well. Well, I mean, I guess the how did it happen, the interesting one to focus in on would be around Untapped Ventures. We could certainly go back. I appreciate that bio. And one of the things that was missing from that was the company that I grew and sold, AMI, back in 2018. And that one had its fair shares of ups and downs. And there was points where I felt stuck and handcuffed, and so there was a whole host of wins and learning lessons. But it's been great to fight through that and really clarify on what Peter Diamandis, both of us are in A360, as you mentioned, to really be able to clarify my life purpose. And when I did my exit, I put myself in a purpose discovery journey. And so, really consumed a lot of Peter's stuff, read a lot of books. I went to Date with Destiny with Tony Robbins and spent a lot of time. Basically, I was like the startup, right? I was iterating and experimenting and putting myself in a number of different areas to try to figure out, like, what is it that I want? Like the whole ikigai, right? Like what is my purpose? What are my unique abilities? And like, what can I be best in the world at, basically? Some people, I have friends, and I'm sure you've probably have friends in YPO, like they'll exit one company, start another company the next day. And I envy those people that that it's just the answer was so easy, or they already knew. For me, it was definitely a journey. And having gone through that journey, I was able to really clarify what you shared in the beginning, which is like what I get off on is helping people have the breakthroughs and transformations, and really just seeing like how much people are, it feels like, without judgment, but it just seems like there's so many limiting beliefs and victim mentalities and just people walking around, and you could see that the people's lives, including my own, I'm not some exception, but people could just be living such a better life in different aspects, but we struggle. It's hard to kind of be at peak performance all the time. And so that's the field that interested me the most. I think that probably there's some it's related to the fact that my dad died when I was a baby. And so when you kind of have that, you already have some things you need to work through as you're growing up, which we can certainly talk about. But yeah, so that's an area of self-development, personal development is something I've been passionate in. And ultimately what I did was create a fund, a VC fund and a venture studio that's really focused around this area of personal growth, personal development, and self-actualization, and both helping founders live their best lives and reach their untapped potentials, but as well as the market, customer markets, and people that are developing products and services and companies that are going to help humanity self-actualize, is the kinds of things we want to back. And so and build, because as a venture studio, we also build ventures. So I hope that wasn't too long of an answer, but
No, that was good. So I got a lot of questions, if that's okay.
Okay, go for it.
So I want to start with the MTP, and then I want to work back from that, because
okay,
this purpose that you've discovered, or maybe you have a different word for it, to help millions of people achieve breakthroughs and access their life's untapped potential through self-actualization. What does that actually mean, George, self-actualization? And how did you finally, or what was the journey? I mean, you mentioned some of the things that you participated in when you were trying to understand this purpose, but take us through a little bit more of the journey and what self-actualization actually means for you.
Actually means, yeah.
Yes.
Sure. So I think like, so just to put some parameters around that, I think like it comes from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Where at the bottom you have your basic needs for survival, food, water, shelter. And then, as it goes up, you have social, kind of family. And then the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is self-actualization, which means that the person is completely fulfilled. They're living their highest calling, they're self-expressed, and it has nothing to do with success. It just has to do with happiness, fulfillment, and contribution to the world, that if you ask them, they're a 10 out of 10, basically, right? Okay. They have and are doing the things that they want to be doing, and they're completely fulfilled and self-actualizing. So that's what we mean when we talk about self-actualizing. It's the psychology term of that, where your health is good, your mental health is good, your physical health is good, you have good connections with family and friends, you're at your work and career is in the right direction, everything is going in the right direction, right? So that's what we mean by that. And so that allows, from an investment thesis standpoint, you could see that we could invest in mental health, physical health, like anything relating to work. And we've spent this first year really focused on work under the Future of Work umbrella. But there's a number of areas that we could go in. But how I got there, which is your question, I think like I kind of knew it all along. I just had to accept it and own it. And what I mean by that is like, I was given Tony Robbins, like Get the Edge CDs when I was, tapes actually, not CDs, when I was 18. And, like, it's so crazy how my friend that just randomly did that at the time when I was in high school, and how that changed my life and set me on this, self-development journey. And I remember when I would be like depressed in my 20s, I would go to Tony Robbins's old site and I would love watching the interventions. I would be blown away by how he would just be able to pick somebody and how he used all of them like masterful techniques to have them have an instant intervention and instant breakthrough and literally change their lives forever based on this, like, 1 hour or half an hour or even a 10-minute interaction. And like, it's almost like the anti of therapy, right? Like usually with a therapist, it's like these, long drawn out sessions over multiple years, but this concept of just having an instant where everything gets clarified and your life changes, it's lasting change because it's so clear what you weren't seeing and now all of a sudden you're seeing it and it completely changes your life. That's the breakthrough, the transformation that I'm really excited about. I always knew I was very passionate about that, but I didn't think you could build like a venture business around that initially. But now I've seen that when you look at mental health, which is again in the spotlight, most recently with Simone Biles when she couldn't compete in the Olympics, and I think it'll just always be there, right? I think it's just people accepting that it's not any different than physical health. Like if you're, so anyway, so I think that was my journey. It was really just kind of getting in tune, asking myself a lot of questions, and Peter provides a lot of questions that I've also helped others when I coach them to discover their massively transformative purpose. So like, I think just kind of doing those the work and the thinking and the asking, Tony talks about how, the answer is the question, right? So if you ask the right question, you'll get the right answer. And so I think if the how was going through the journey and being patient and asking myself a lot of the right questions and sitting with it, and then it just kind of became clearer and clearer as it went.
Okay. And you mentioned depression you said when I was depressed in my 20s. Has that been something that has depression been something that you've experienced and had to deal with as you've been, coming along through your first company and all of the challenges that go along with that we'll get into?
Yeah. No, I haven't been clinically diagnosed as depressed, but so I would probably not put myself in the same category as people that have probably legitimately struggled with that and have had to really struggle with it and overcome it. I think I faced it from high achieving entrepreneur's mindset of being frustrated and judgmental at himself for not achieving the results he expected from himself, and then constantly judging and getting sad and frustrated, and at times just digging myself a mental hole, and we're having to work myself out of it because of my own judgment. As I came to learn, a lot of that was just self-judgment, which I actively work on.
George, was that you? Do you think in retrospect that was you judging yourself against yourself, or do you think it was you judging yourself against other people or other ideals that you felt you weren't, maybe achieving what someone else was, or didn't, look the part that someone else who was successful in your world looked, or something like that? I'm just curious about, how, I know I've had that before. I'm just wondering if you thought it was just, if it was just you comparing yourself to you, or you maybe comparing yourself to other people as well.
Yeah, I think it was definitely both. I think there was comparables I could look at, like similar entrepreneurs started similar times and they had a lot more success quicker than me. And in some cases, I didn't feel like they were as good of people or as smart or something like that. And I couldn't reconcile that. So I definitely felt that. And then I've just always had my fair share of like self-judgment as well, like just expecting the best for myself, being disappointed. I feel like, so like, I think, so when my dad passed and I grew up without a dad, I think a common result of that is you have something to prove, right? Like kids grow up And either, if they go the good path, it's very much like, I am worthy, right? I am enough, I am worthy. And you have to prove that through success and achievement. And so I did, like, I was like a 4.3 in high school. I finished USC in 3 years. And like, I kind of had the Midas touch. And then when I, got out and I took over the family business at the age of 20, I thought I was just going to continue with like just being able to make millions immediately. And back then in 2000, it wasn't like how it is now for founders, and the amount of support and mentorship and funding and accelerators and just all of that. None of that was there. Like when I graduated USC, like there was nothing. And then like, oh, there's this thing called EO where you could be in a peer group with other entrepreneurs. And that was like one of the only things around. And I was in EO LA for, I think, close to 15 years. And that was great. And we built relationships with YPO and like Vistage, and I was a part of other CEO groups as well.
Yep.
But I think like for the most part, I might have gone on a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, it felt like very lonely and isolated, and it didn't have the help that, like for example, what we offer to our founders today.
Yeah. Okay. So it's lonely at the top sort of thing. And yeah.
Right.
And back then and even still today, I mean, first of all, like the first step in any program is acknowledging you have a problem, right? Or acknowledging you have an opportunity that you can't figure out how to achieve or maximize or whatever. But then you actually have to go find it, right? It's not going to find you a lot of the times. And I find and I'm glad I know it took you maybe a few years to do it. It took me longer, but I'm glad you found it, because that kind of help, whether it's EO or Vistage or all the other groups that are out there, it's really built to make it not so lonely at the top, to just get rid of that notion that there's no support for you. There's a lot of support for you. And there's a lot of programs like what you were in who will help you, especially now, will help you navigate and avoid, hopefully, some of the things, the traps or the stuckness or whatever you might otherwise find yourself in. So I'm glad you did that. I'm curious though, you took over the family business at 20. You said your dad had passed away when you were a child. Tell me the dynamics of the family business when you took it over.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, I'm of Armenian heritage. My mom and dad had met here, gotten married, and had me, and then my dad had passed all within like a few years. So my dad had been here for a while. My mom was just new to the States. She was an immigrant. She spoke English, but she was a teacher. And so here she is in a new country with a new husband and a new baby, and then her husband passes, and she's in the business, right? And the business was, at the time, it was a microfilm business, micrographics. If you remember the old kind of going to the library and putting rolls of microfilm in the reader and seeing that on
unfortunately,
the screen.
I do remember that, George. So that dates me a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm there
Thank
could be other podcasts that they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But
what kind of internet is that? I don't know.
Yeah. Micrograph, that sounds cool. Micro what? Yeah. But yeah, so that's what the business was. And then so my dad had passed. My mom had actually shown some incredible resilience and entrepreneurialism by being able to take it over, be a single mom, become a business owner all of a sudden, be able to learn this business, manage it, and then continue to get some of what turned out to be our marquee clients while I was just a little kid, like Disney and Dole Packaged Foods and the Federal Reserve Bank and other like marquee clients like that. So she really turned into quite a businesswoman. And so when I was going to high school, I always kind of worked in the business, but I started to get more involved. And then when I went to USC, I would be going Tuesdays and Thursdays to USC and then applying what I was learning on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays to the business, just as a teenager, right? But that was kind of when I first started getting really excited about business versus, being a doctor or a lawyer, the traditional paths. And then, but when I graduated and took over, it was already the start of disruption in that business, where the analog microfilm, right, which is think of, for the listeners that aren't familiar, think of that like the old film, right? When you would take photos on a Kodak, and then you would get that printed out onto 25 printed pictures. That's what microfilm was. It was putting the paper documents onto these rolls of microfilm.
Like
as
the
a better
strip, you
means.
mean, right, George? Like the
Strip,
strip
yeah.
that you would get. Okay. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah, the strip. And then you would put that roll back into this thing called a reader to be able to then see the document. And that was paperless and document management back in at that time. I would, the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s. And so, but by the time that I got involved, it was already transitioning to digital, and it was document scanning instead of document microfilming. So I brought on our whole document imaging operation. I set that up. The document imaging then turned into document management software, and we started implementing document management software. Then that became really understanding not just like what is that document to scan it at the end, but what is the business process that customer is going through. Like if it's a loan processing or student application processing or accounts payable processing. So really doing business process management, business process automation. So by the time we sold it, it was a complete kind of software and services around helping companies eliminate and automate their document processes.
And from the time you came into the business to the time you ended up selling us, tell me a little bit about the progression of the business. So you had an old technology that was probably widely used, but was going to be perhaps irrelevant in the very near future if you hadn't made this turn. You end up making the turn or the pivot or whatever people want to call it these days. And then in what happened from then till the sale?
Yeah, so I think that's where a lot of the ups and downs and kind of the mini depressions and judgments and stuff happened. That there was some growth and some fun and making money and great relationships, but also there was a lot of frustration. I mean, it was basically a bloody red ocean, right? So it's a lot of what happened that I didn't want, or I don't consider the wins that have led me to be where I am now. Right, it was a bloody red ocean, ultra competitive. You had everybody, the scanning companies, everybody was dropping their price. When we started, you would get 15 cents an image for scan, and then 10 cents, and then 5 cents, and then by the time we sold, it was like down to 3 or 4 cents an image. So that's how commoditized scanning had become.
Okay.
Everybody had gotten into this document management software game. So all the copier companies, all the enterprise companies like Microsoft and Oracle, everybody. And then even the line of business systems all had then incorporated some document management add-on, like QuickBooks had it. So it became just super competitive. And so we were bootstrapped, we weren't venture scale. It was a bloody red ocean market. And those are all the things. And while we grew, and we had like 25 full-time employees and maybe like 25, part-time contract kind of temp at times when we would get busier. I think like part of what I really learned was I want to be spending time in areas that are fast growth, that can really become big, make an impact, that are venture scale, that deserve to receive investment, and that really are creating new markets and categories. The classic blue oceans, not red oceans.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's one of the criteria that we look for is there's a lot of great founders, a lot of great ideas, but there's just no point if it's a lot harder if you're going to create a company that's going into an existing market. So we're really, in tune with helping create new categories and markets, like how Uber created the ride hailing service, right? And Airbnb created the kind of the home sharing business, right? We want those kinds of companies versus like another Me Too category. So I'm just kind of tying a lot of my experience, which was almost like 2 decades. I did that for about 18 years. And so, and a lot of that has now shaped how I make decisions and what I do for the next 20 plus years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to be in a bloody red ocean, right? That's a grind. Now that gives me some understanding of the ups and downs. So you're excited about what you can do, but the core business is still getting chopped. It seems like every day someone's asking you to do it for less, do it for less, do it for less. And it's hard,
Right.
it's hard. And a lot of us and a lot of business owners, they just accept that as the reality. Like, hey, I just got to keep fighting. I just got to keep fighting. I just got to keep fighting. And, every day that you fight takes a little bit of energy away from you that you're probably never going to get back. So you're better
And
off.
sometimes,
Go ahead.
yeah, sorry. So then some years you say, okay, I'm going to start working on the other thing. And then you go do the other thing, but this isn't big enough to stand on its own. And so then you end up hurting the core and you end up having to come back to it. And it's in a worse position. So that feeds the vicious cycle of not getting to where you want to get to. So yeah, exactly. And I think so that's why I just got to a point where I knew I needed to sell it. I had to continue to build to sell, right? As John Warlow talks about. And fortunately, we found a great partner that both of the service lines that we did were a great strategic fit. They were missing in their portfolio. And so it was a great strategic acquisition for them. It created a nice outcome, and I was able to move on from that chapter.
So let me ask you just a couple more questions, and then we're going to move on to your life post AMI. First, the plan, you coming in to take over at age 20, was that something that you and your mom had talked about and decided on at some point earlier, or did you have different aspirations? I mean, you mentioned doctor, lawyer, that kind of thing. You went through USC in 3 years, which is that's no easy task. So you got brains, and I'm just wondering, was that a natural thing that you had worked out, or was it was it different than that?
I think she wanted that, but wasn't going to pressure it. So she kind of like, that was teed up for me if I wanted it. And a lot of the kids graduating, the hot thing at the time in 2000 was getting into a big consulting job, right? Like Deloitte, PWs. And so so that was the option I was weighing against, although that was also the time of the dot-com bubble, but I didn't really understand it at the time. It wasn't like only a few percentage were into that. Most people were into the rest of general business. It wasn't as popular, like tech wasn't as popular as it is today. So it wasn't something that we had directly talked about. I guess I didn't like take over day one. I was vice president initially, and then I think somewhere within a few years, it was pretty clear that it was really the other way. I was calling the shots and she was taking a back seat. And then it even got to a point where then it wasn't working anymore because I was trying to take risk and she was risk averse at a different place in her life. And then it got to a point where it really wasn't working out and I needed to buy her out to continue. And there was
Okay.
there was some tension and learning family business kind of stuff as part of that. But ultimately, we're able to do that. I was able to buy her out, kind of have her get into a better place for her, and then let me keep growing it and do what I needed to do to get to the exit.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about that exactly, but I was thinking about, as you were talking, trying to find the blue ocean, you still need the cash flow from from the red shark infested ocean to fund that kind of stuff. So there's always this like, oh gosh, if we keep taking money out of here to go here, is that actually going to work? And that can be super scary, even when you know that what you're doing is being, commoditized down to, something that's no fun either.
Right.
And are you and your mom on okay now, or what?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think she resented it initially. She couldn't understand why I was doing that, and she didn't see it. She was completely at a blind spot
Yeah.
to how much of a problem it was and how it was affecting my ability to see her as my mom, because I just saw her as this slacking business partner that was frustrating me daily, and I couldn't get past seeing that and go back to seeing her true essence, which was, which was unconditional love. She was my mother, she was my father, she was my brother, she was my sister. Right when my dad died, I was an only child, I didn't get a
Right.
chance to have siblings. She did everything for me, and we were so close. And now this business relationship had completely tarnished that. And so that was probably one of the more important things about buying her out and getting her out of the business, was to be able to go back to that relationship, which took some time because, like I said, initially she was frustrated, but then she was able to find some boards and other volunteering and other things, and she was able to move on to that next chapter. But we just needed to kind of cut this off so that she could do that. She wasn't able to do that on her own.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. And then getting back to kind of where we started with your MTP, you sell the business, and it sounds like it was a good outcome for everyone, the acquirer, and for you and your family and your teammate, team members and all of that. But what's interesting to me is I think most people see that if they're looking at you, kind of like you were comparing yourself to other people before. If they're looking at you, they say to themselves, wow, George just, has the world right where he wants it, right? He like sold the business. It was a great outcome. He's set, right? But you said, you really, after that point, you needed to find your purpose. And I think that's a really interesting thing that a lot of people don't understand, is that, or can't comprehend, that someone who had something financially good happen, their life's work or their 20 years of work, or your mom and you, and, maybe it's 35 years of work that, that combined that got put in. That's like what everybody wants out of life. But
Right.
having sold a business myself, there is that part of it. But I'm interested to hear more about what you were feeling there afterwards, because yeah, that's great. But you then kind of also, and I'm talking now here about me, maybe not, this may not be for you, but you tell me, you got a lot of identity wrapped up in that work that you've done, and that company that you've bought, and that team that you've built. And when that identity kind of goes away, it can become a little difficult to understand what's next for me. This is a great outcome, I'm really happy, but what's next? Because a lot of us don't plan for that kind of a next.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. So I call that the post-exit identity crisis. And I think it's real. And I coach other entrepreneurs that have exits. That when I was figuring it out, so the way it hit me, the panic of the post-exit identity crisis, was because the built to sell tool, the value builder system from John Warlow, was so helpful. When I sold, that was like the first thing I picked up, was just to be able to earn income and do stuff. So I started helping other entrepreneurs with exit coaching, right? Like helping them like get their business ready and be able to sell for top dollar. But I quickly realized this is exactly what I don't want to do. I don't want to be working at the end of the life cycle on generally traditional businesses that are going to sell for 3 to 5 times EBITDA. I want to be working at the beginning of venture scale unicorn potential businesses that are being valued at 10 to 50x top line revenue.
Right.
I want to be working with the smartest and most capable founders and supporting them getting started and really having impact and doing things that are going to make the world a better place. I felt like I spent 20 years close to 20 years just helping companies eliminate paper and automate workflows. And some people say like, okay, well, we saved the environment a little bit by helping trees. Like, not really. Like, I ultimately, yes, a little bit, but in terms of like making real impact, like leaving a legacy and having something that I could be proud of and felt like I contributed to this planet and I was able to help people actually move the needle on their lives. Not just have their paper at their computer versus having to go to a file cabinet, but like real impact. I hadn't even scratched the surface. So you're right. I did pause to celebrate because that was a great accomplishment at that point in my career. But I knew that was just, it was almost like just step one, get some chips off the table, and then like, let's really start the real thing. And it took me a little longer than I would have expected, but it's actually gone relatively better than expected. Like if you asked me February 2018 when I sold, I don't think I would have thought that 3.5 years later, I would already be a VC, have launched my fund, have a venture studio, have a brand with Untapped that's very quickly growing, being recognized in LA and the US, and one of 20 studios in GSSN, the Global Startup Studio Network, and and all the things that have happened. It's all happened a lot quicker than I would have expected at that time. But I think a lot of it is because I was slow and intentional. Like one of the things we teach is go slow to go fast. So I went slow to figure the right things out. So now I'm going fast. The last year has just gone so fast with executing because we're clear on the mission. You heard it in the beginning, right? Like helping people live their best lives, tap their untapped potential. So we're clear on what our mission is. We're clear on who we want to work with as far as the founders. And I think it just, people get attracted to the mission, they hop on board, and we're able to execute.
Well, I love that you talked about the go slow to go fast and the intentionality, because I think a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs in particular, feel like speed is the most important thing. And it is important. Speed is important, but speed can kill when you don't have, sort of this idea of where you actually want to go. Right.
Right.
If you're just taking every turn as fast as you can take it and just, stomping on the gas all the time without a destination, you can drive yourself and your business right into the ground because nobody knows who's going to follow you. They don't know where you're going.
Right. Yeah. And I think like in today's hyper competitive kind of globalized economy, it is speed, but it's speed of learning, right?
Yeah. Okay.
The speed of learning is the number one competitive advantage. So running rapid experimentation cycles to learn what you need to learn to make the decisions, whether you're a big corporate or you're an early stage founder, that's the kind of speed, not necessarily the speed of just trying to execute or the speed of trying to hit goals, because many times like things are changing so fast. It's really getting clear on what you need to learn and then learning that as quickly as possible through experiments, tests, studies, research, whatever the case might be.
Right. And you mentioned, this 3.5 years and how far you've come. And that was it. I mean, you said earlier that you didn't have any, outside capital in AMI. So you're not really, I'm assuming you weren't really known in the VC community either, because you were an entrepreneur, business owner. You weren't somebody out doing deals or taking money. So how did you, I guess, first off, let's talk about the intentionality of when you decided what your purpose was, when you figured that out, and how you actually have moved from there to where you are now with your first fund, closed and investments being made and everything else that Untapped is doing.
Yeah, you're right. So I it's not like I had a prolific angel investing career like when I was at AMI. So all of it came just by virtue of committing myself to it fully. And then, one of my Clifton top five is learner, right? And so I just jumped in and I was, wanted to learn everything. and see how I could win. One of my other Clifton top 5 is competition, right? So like I like to compete, I like to win. So um, and a lot of great things along the way. So like for example, I was able to get into Founder Institute's VC Lab program, and I was in their second cohort in that. It's kind of like an accelerator for emerging VCs. So that helped me. About 4 months was a tremendous help in having me kind of like accelerate my learning of VC and all that. So I just put myself in different positions of learning from others and learning from the best, and not just reading, but actually participating in programs and groups and things like that. And then I started immediately when I exited. I had some money, so I started immediately making investments. I learned how, and I think one of the things is that my judgment, which probably came from some element of my limbic brain from not having my dad, and then like growing up just needing to be really good at judging the scenario and really being able to kind of fend for myself. So I think that that's coming around to be really helpful in a VC career, because I'm able to harness the ability to quickly assess a situation, whether that's a person or a business opportunity, and be able to get a good sense of what the opportunity might be, and what are the upsides, downsides, and things like that. And then that combined with like a love for coaching and life coaching, business coaching, I'm able to quickly ask questions, and I think generally have like good advice or good thoughts that I could help a founder. So I think I'm picking wisely where I'm picking an area that I have a natural hardwiring to be good at. And we're seeing that now. It hasn't been long, but we're seeing that I'm early in my career. I'm getting access to great deals. I'm making great picks. And we just need to keep replicating that and keep showing that it's scalable. And we're making some more investments now that I think will continue to show that. And then where the whole Venture Studio slots in, Venture Studio Accelerator is, it was my lack of fulfillment of being an operator. So while the operator chapter closed and I had an exit, I didn't just want to be a VC. Like I didn't just want to, I felt that I had more to give in terms of what my capabilities were that I wasn't able to best express at AMI, that, being a builder and being a true helper. So I didn't just want to put money, typical VC portfolio, you make 30 bets, 20 of them are going to fail. And then out of the 10, you want like 1 or 2 or 3 to be a unicorn. As long as that happens, that's great. They're really just kind of, it's horse racing, right? It's betting on the jockey and the horse, and sitting back, giving some advice, being helpful, making some introductions. I didn't want to be low touch VC. I wanted to be on the other end of the spectrum, high touch, high value add. I want to dig in. I want to help you. I want to get involved. And that's essentially like what an accelerator and a venture studio is. A venture studio is basically, I'm like your co-founder, right? I'm going to act like a co-founder to you, to help you in the most highest sense that I could possibly help you in your journey. And stuff like that. So that's another area where my past is reflected in the design of the current.
And when you went through this accelerator program yourself, started building your credentials and went out, started raising money, how did people react to you, George? So you're a successful business person, you sold a business, now you're going to be, venture capitalist, but you're going to do it in the studio model, which means you're going to actually use the operational experience that you've had from running a business and the financial experience as well, but you're going to put that to work actually, and not just be someone who'd be like, oh yeah, I'll invest in this or I'll invest in that. But how did people take that? Were they like, you've never done this before? Why would I back someone that's unproven, or did they say, George, this is, the greatest thing. Why didn't you come to me? What was the reaction? And I know there was probably a broad range of reaction, but I'm just interested in the process and the reactions and how you dealt with them.
Yeah. One of the great things that that VC Lab course kind of taught us was that like the thesis you came up with on day one of the program was not going to be the thesis that you raised your fund with.
Yeah.
Almost just like a startup concept, like your idea today is not going to be the one that finds product market fit. And so we've been on that. I've been on that journey. And really just taking a lot of feedback. So I think there's been a lot of learning and feedback. I think our investor deck is on version 8.5 going to version 9 with kind of a massive change coming up. I think I really found my niche in your what we call like the angel CEO, right? So they're an entrepreneur, they're a CEO, they have success, they do some angel investing, and they look at it, they say, okay, I can make another angel investment and I get one deal, and I guess if I follow all the angel books, I should expect that 9 out of 10 times that's going to fail. Or I can make that one investment in George. He's putting it in deals that he's actively working on and diligencing. Some are from his studio, some are from with the corporate partners, others are from his accelerator program. And that way I'm going to become a part owner in 10 deals. And I'll probably get to learn a little bit more. I'll see how George does it. And, I kind of like what he's doing. I like what he represents. I like his mission. I believe in him, and let's go. And I think that's where I ultimately found my fit for Fund One, is fellow entrepreneurs that are angel investors that think of this as a smarter bet than just making another single, and not that they shouldn't, but just this is an alternative to making another single angel investment.
Right.
And we have the opportunity for them to be involved, for them to be investor advisors, and maybe if they like one of the portfolio companies, they want to mentor and things of that nature. So that's my impression of it. But I guess we could turn the tables on this one and and maybe ask you, Mike. What was your experience and what led you to want to get involved?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I grew up in in the waste business. That was my industry. Still is my main industry. So I did a startup in 1992, ran the business for 22 years, sold it, for a good exit for everybody, kind of similar to your story. And I had been investing in venture capital, private equity, and a few individual companies, George. But after 2015, I started looking at the universe of possibilities. And I felt, and I'm not going to say this is my MTP because I'm still working on that, but I felt like I owed it to the entrepreneurial community to help support in any way I could new entrepreneurs, new founders, new companies, new ideas. I also I'm from the Midwest, and we're, it's not, LA or Silicon Valley. It's not Boston. We have a fledgling but growing startup community here, but this is really I'll call it a regular business type environment. What, like the EBITDA you were talking about, we're building real companies, not, and the mentality
Right.
here, there's a lot of mentality here around that. And I think it's great because those companies can become exceptionally valuable as well. But when it came to investing, I did not, first of all, a lot of those companies don't need money. If they need money, it's coming from private equity or something. And, you could be in a fund there, but you don't get a direct sort of involvement, right? So I was looking around and I wanted to support entrepreneurs, and I wanted an education, George. I wanted to be educated on the things that were coming down the road that would never get in front of my screens, my vision here in Milwaukee or Wisconsin where I was, or it would take a long time for it to happen. So I started investing in startups first, and I did it through syndicates mostly, and then I made a couple of larger startup investments. But then some guys from YPO actually put something on this deal network site that we have about a venture studio, which I had never heard of. This was probably 5 years ago. And they were out of San Diego and operating, company in New Mexico. And I started talking to those guys, and I really, really, really liked this idea that they would bring their expertise to these founders and these startup companies, including taking over the founder role if they had to, and earning additional equity for themselves and for their investors as a result of this operational role. So I got involved in that, and then that was my first venture studio. And then I've done 2 others since then, yours being one. The reason I got into yours was simple. 1, I had this good experience already. 2, it fit with what, this support and this education that I was looking for. 3, I met you through a very credible source at A360, and you actually were just the kind of person that put stuff together. We did a Zoom with a bunch of people first, and you kind of explained your thing, and you let people explain their thing, and it was just a very relaxed, no sales pitch, no, I'm gonna change the world today, but you should invest, no hard sell, nothing. And I just got very comfortable with you and your experience and what you wanted to do. And I was already a fan of the studio model and backing, startups and early stage companies. And so when you finally, got it all put together, it was an easy decision for me to come along, because it just hit all the marks that I had established for myself.
Gotcha.
How's that? Does that work?
Yeah, no, that's actually super helpful. That's great to learn about the backstory that led to it, because you're right. After that showcase that I put on, and yeah, we had a few startups, we had a few other funds, right? I was just the event organizer, and I was also presenting a little bit. But then when we did connect after that, you were probably one of the quicker decisions. And it makes sense now because you kind of knew, you were clear on what you were looking for. You had already kind of like, you knew what to sniff out. You knew what your radar was tuned in for. You already had some experience with the venture studio model. So that's actually super helpful.
Yeah. And another thing about Midwesterners is we're not a lot, we're generally not tire kickers or meeting takers. If we're interested in something, we're gonna we're gonna go ahead. If we're not we're not, but we're not gonna like drag you along, like I'm kind of interested. And anyway, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah,
my little cool Midwest plug. So you had mentioned at the beginning, or I did, as I was reading through the bio, that you had this thesis, this idea that you were starting the fund with, and then you just mentioned version 8.5, version 9. Where are you right now with Untapped and what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, definitely. So I think when I was, and to your point earlier, since given where I was at, that I have like people questioning experience and track record and credibility. So what I had done was I'd taken this MTP that I shared with you around helping humanity self-actualize, and I'd combined that with my with my lane, my experience, which was in B2B enterprise SaaS and my workflow automation. So I kind of combine, like self-actualization and B2B, and it was future of work. And it was COVID, and the pandemic was disrupting everything. And like where we work, when we work, who we work with, and why we work was all changing. And so that's what we started the thesis around, was this future of work and helping people self-actualize at work. And I think that now where we are is we just have more investors and we have more founders that want to work with us. And I even think that I didn't need to do that, or maybe I needed to do that limiting before, but I no longer need to do that, because what I've been saying this whole time is it's really about personal growth and self-actualization. It didn't need to be constrained to the workplace. So all we're doing is just removing the constraint that was almost like blocking 80 to 90% of the founders, the startups, and the investors. And so that's kind of the pivot from 8.5 to 9, if you will. And we're really excited about that. We're just in the middle of that. And we're really excited about what that opens up as we get to be able to serve a much wider audience of founders and investors and advisors that all are aligned on this mission. So that's the main thing there.
Are you willing to talk about a couple of the companies that you've already invested in, so people get a sense of, what you're actually talking about when it comes to making your selections, for example, and what you hope these companies do?
Yeah, definitely. There's some that we can discuss and some that we can't, but happy to
We'll skip the ones that we can't.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also there's going to be a whole new batch that comes through in our Future of Entrepreneurship program that we're going to be starting soon. And so I could talk a little bit about what we're hoping for or looking for out of that as well.
Yeah, take it wherever you want to go, George.
Yeah. Okay, so so in terms of the program, which I just brought up, so we're pretty excited about that. Earlier this year we ran the Future of Work program, and that was great for that thesis, right? But the one that we're going to do now is the Future of Entrepreneurship, and basically the thesis on that is that the old way, right? That one or two or three founders with little to no experience get together, and then they get 5 to 10 angels to take a chance on them and write them a check, and then they do something they've never done, and then this is happening this is happening millions of times around the world, and 9 out of 10 times it fails. Like, that's broken, right? We can admit that that's a broken system. It's a royal waste of human time, energy, potential, money for the founders, the angel investors, anybody that was in that umbrella, their early employees that came in, right? So it just doesn't make sense. And that's one of the things that's broken about entrepreneurship in VC, is that model actually works perfectly fine for VCs. Because like I said, as long as they make 30 investments and 3 are unicorns, they don't care about the other 27. But what we want to do with this Future of Entrepreneurship program is create a new way, right? Acknowledge that the old way is not working and create a new way where we support the founders differently, like in some of the value add that you mentioned about what a venture studio does. Really support the founders, teach them the right way from the beginning, and then have the right ecosystem members that they're going to need, the right mentors, advisors, investors, customers, talent, interns. Put as much of that right from the beginning, and help match them to the right resources, and almost like reduce the burden or the responsibility that these 1 or 2 or 3 people that have never done this before have to kind of figure it out and make it happen. Like, have it be more of a communal thing. And I don't mean like a local community, but I mean a community of entrepreneurship. We're calling it like co-entrepreneurship or venture co-building, things like that, which is this, and so we're going to run the program. If it goes well, then we're going to expand it and add more of what I'm saying in the upcoming versions. But this could really change the face of entrepreneurship. Like, it could really change how we build companies going forward. And so we're very, very excited about it.
And that's happening when?
We're going to be opening applications like in November, and then initial kind of prep in December, and go full force in January.
Nice. Nice. So before we end here, George, is there anything that I haven't brought up that you want to talk about?
I think we've had a great conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And at the beginning, I mentioned your websites. I got it one wrong, untapped.ventures. Gave your LinkedIn, your Instagram. Is there any other information you want people to know about you? Or people, that are interested in investing, people that are interested in having you, becoming a founder who wants to become part of your studio or wants to meet you or whatever the case may be, where do you want it? Where's the best place to send people?
Yeah, definitely. So the best one is just my email. It's George at Untapped Ventures, untapped.ventures. So George at UNTAPPED.ventures. And then if it's, I have an assistant that helps me, either myself or somebody will get back if it's not me, and take it from there. But yeah, would love to hear from your listeners if they're interested in learning more about any of what we talked about, whether it's about investing, advising, being a founder, or just kind of getting involved if they're into the whole future of work, or if they're into like, personal growth, any of those things. Always love connecting with aligned people and exploring collaboration opportunities and synergy opportunities.
All right. Well, sounds good. And if you're in A360, Abundance 360, make sure you look up George as well.
Yeah, we'll see each other in January in
Yeah.
LA.
Yep. Sounds good. Hey, George, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been really fun to explore your story and get to know you better. I mean, I've had a couple of calls with you, but we covered a lot of great stuff here that I didn't know, and that I think is tremendous value for the listeners. And you've had such a great experience, and I'm really, really thrilled to be part of this new one with you. So thanks for the work you're doing, for supporting entrepreneurs, for helping them, for co-entrepreneuring with them, and for making a really, really big difference in helping people self-actualize. I appreciate you and what you're doing.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the How Did Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at mikemalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How Did Happen podcast.